For me, the best part of baseball in the summer is going to the games in person. I just got back from Phoenix with my girlfriend Alexis. We are checking out her favorite team, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and it was a wonderful opportunity to show her her first ballpark experience in Chase Field, and a beautiful ballpark at that. But it got me reminiscing about some of the other opportunities I've had to see some of the best players of all time. I've had the opportunity to see games in 9 different ballparks, all listed right here. And I've had a chance to see some incredible players. And you think about it, I've seen 16 of the 30 teams in person. So that got me really thinking, what is the best team I've ever seen live, position by position? Here we go. And you want to stick around for my starting rotation because it is incredible. Let's go. We're going to start behind the plate with some of the best catchers I've seen. Victor Martinez, Brian McCann, Carlos Santana, Russell Martin. But the best catcher I have ever seen in person, Buster Posey. Yes, for me, Buster Posey is one of, if not the best catchers of all time. The 3-time World Series champion, the probably Hall of Famer, definitely in my eyes. Absolutely incredible catcher, very consistent hitter. He really changed the game, I think, in a lot of ways, especially in the playoffs. You think about those Giants rotations and the way Buster Posey led those rotations through the playoffs, and the way Tim Lincecum, Matt Cain, Madison Bumgarner, they all did incredible things in those 3 World Series runs, and the guy leading the charge was Buster Posey. And you think about that, he was Rookie of the Year and World Series champion all in the same season. That is unquestioned leadership. Buster Posey to me is one of the best catchers of all time. I had the opportunity to see him in a couple different series against the Pirates and Mets, and he was absolutely a delight to watch, work behind the plate, call games, and you knew he was going to be clutch with the bat. So for me, the best catcher I've ever seen, future Hall of Famer, Buster Posey. Moving along to first base, I just have to share this list because I don't want to miss anybody off this list. Mike Napoli, Nick Swisher, Brandon Belt, Anthony Rizzo, Josh Bell, Paul Goldschmidt, Ji-Man Choi, Christian Walker, who's one of my favorites right now in baseball. That is quite the list of first basemen I've seen in person, but none of them compare to former league MVP Freddie Freeman. I've had the privilege of seeing Freeman now twice with the Braves and with the Dodgers. The man is a consistent 330 home run, 100 RBI threat. If he continues on this, is going to be in the Hall of Fame. Freddie Freeman is one of my favorite first basemen of all time as well. And the reason being is he has represented Canada at the World Baseball Classic because of connections with his parents. I think he's an all-around class act. He's one of my favorite players to listen to him on the mic as well. When they have him mic'd up during games, Freddie Freeman is absolutely incredible. But the way he handles himself, I've seen him at the plate so many times now that you just know he's going to come through with that massive hit for his team in a clutch situation. Freddie Freeman is one of the best first basemen of all time. His defense is also very solid. I've had the joy and privilege of seeing him twice. So Freddie Freeman definitely has to be the first baseman on my list. Second base is another impressive list with guys like Ozzie Albies, Robinson Cano, Luis Arraez, Aaron Hill, Ketel Marte. But the best second baseman I've ever seen, Dustin Pedroia of the Boston Red Sox. Now, Pedroia was not one of my favorite players of all time, and I was definitely rooting for the Blue Jays when I got a chance to see Pedroia in person. But how can you deny the former league MVP? I actually think he would thrive in this environment in Major League Baseball right now because he excelled at hitting the high fastball for such a small guy. Pedroia never saw a high fastball he didn't like. Absolute incredible all-time hustle type player, always on the move, always talking, always taking that big cut. Dustin Pedroia was a real class player to watch, a former league MVP. He really knew how to drive the ball, even from that smaller stature. I really appreciate the way he played the game with such hustle. He wasn't my favorite player because I was tended to be rooting against him, but you have to acknowledge him in a type of list like this. He is definitely one of the best second basemen. You could argue Robinson Cano here, but I'll take some steps back because of the drug issues. I think Ketel Marte and Ozzy Albies are very impressive as well, but for me it has to be Dustin Pedroia. Third base is just as impressive the rest. Mike Lowell, Kevin Youkilis, Manny Machado, Kyle Seager, all very good third basemen I've had the chance to see in person. And maybe I'm going to be a little bit biased here because Manny Machado is probably the best of them, but the guy I'm going to remember the most, Josh Donaldson, because I've seen him twice. I've seen him with the Blue Jays during his MVP year. I had a chance to see him in Seattle. I've also had a chance to see him with the Braves when he was having a fantastic year for them. Chance to see him in Minnesota. He really understood the game. Such a class hitter. He just really understood the fundamentals of hitting. Such a fun player to watch drive the baseball. Very good defensively in the years I've seen him as well. I know he's fallen off the last couple of years with the Yankees, but Josh Donaldson was one of, if not the best player in baseball at one time. And it was like a lot of fun seeing him in person. To me, he is the best third baseman I have ever had a chance to see in person. Again, the former league MVP. Like a lot of these guys, potential Hall of Fame guys, former league MVPs, I've had a lot of privilege to see some of these guys in person, and Donaldson is definitely on this list. Shortstop is probably the toughest choice I had to make. I've seen Jose Reyes, Xander Bogaerts, Brandon Crawford, Fernando Tatis Jr. All four are really hard to pick between, and there's a lot of like about all of them. But I'm going to go with Xander Bogaerts because I had the opportunity to see him with the Red Sox when he was really excelling. I think Xander is one of the best and most underrated shortstops of all time. And you could probably say the same thing about Brandon Crawford. I really had a tough time deciding between those two. Tatis gets knocked because of steroids, and he's not a shortstop anymore. So I'm going to go with Xander Bogaerts. I've seen him twice now as well with the Red Sox and with the Padres. He did not impress me as much with the Padres. I'm going to remember him as a Red Sox, as he should. I understand the contract in San Diego is going to run for a long time, but in my eyes, Xander Bogaerts is always going to be a Red Sox. He's a champion that way, a very good defender at times. There's been years when he hasn't been as successful that way, but he was always a guy you could expect to hit around 300, and he always seemed to come through in the clutch. So for me, the best shortstop I've had the chance to see in person, Xander Bogaerts, Boston Red Sox. In terms of talent, the weakest position I've probably seen is left field. I've seen guys like Michael Brantley, Eddie Rosario, Adam Lind, and Canadian Jason Bay. But the top one I'm going to say is one who I just really love to watch play in person, and that was Pittsburgh Pirates, Starling Marte. And yes, I'm putting him as a Pirate because I saw Starling Marte exclusively as a Pirate. He's probably the player I've seen live in person the most. I've seen him in Pittsburgh, I've seen him in St. Louis, and in San Francisco. Why I have him so high on this list in terms of left fielders? Because he was so fun to watch in the outfield. He had such range and explosiveness and speed. He got to balls that you just didn't expect other outfielders to get to. Starling Marte is an absolute crazy player to watch live, in person, tracking down the baseball. And he had some very clutch hits while I was watching him in person, and they always stood up my mind. I really just love the way Starling Marte approached the game. The speed, the energy he brought. I really appreciate the way he played the game, especially out in left field in PNC, in that big left field. And I've seen him in some pretty big ballparks, chase down some pretty impressive catches. So Starling Marte has to be the most impressive left fielder I've ever seen. Center field is a very short list. Jacoby Ellsbury, Torrey Hunter, Brian Reynolds. But Andrew McCutchen is going to be on my list. Yes, the former league MVP. He is one of my favorite players of all time. I absolutely love to watch Kutch play, especially when you pair him with Starling Marte. Between the two of them, they chase down balls you just didn't get to expect them to see. The 2015-2016 seasons for the Pirates are absolutely incredible because of Kutch. The former league MVP could really chase down the baseball in its prime. Tremendous hitter to watch with that really short, quick approach at the plate. I loved his swing, of one of the best of all time to watch in person that way. And I remember him making a diving catch in San Francisco while I was in left field. It felt like he was running right at me, making a diving catch to save the game. So for me, Andrew McCutchen, without question, is the best center fielder I've ever had a chance to see live in person. Right field is probably the deepest position in terms of position players that I've ever seen all time. Bobby Abreu, Jose Bautista, Mookie Betts, Ronald Acuna Jr. I could even include Giancarlo Stanton as an outfielder, but for me, the best right fielder I have ever seen of all time, Vladimir Guerrero Sr. Yes, I'm a little biased too because Vladdy is my favorite player of all time, but I had a chance to see him in Toronto as an Angel, and let me tell you what, when he hits the ball, it just sounds different. I have never heard a player hit a ball that just sounded the way it did when Vladdy hit it. He hit a line drive home run to left field that barely got over the fence, but when he hit it, you knew it had been hit and was definitely a home run. And of course, the incredible arm that Vladdy still possessed at that time. I didn't get a chance to see when he was a 40-40 threat with the wheels that he used to have, but the arm and the power, the Hall of Famer was just an absolute joy to watch as a player. His swing, his approach to the plate, it was just different. And when it was hit, you knew it was hit. So my favorite and best right fielder I've ever had a chance to see in person, Hall of Famer, Vladimir Guerrero Sr. Now there's a couple guys like Betts and Acuna that might change that later in this list, but for right now it's still got to be Vladdy. As deep as right field is, I've seen a couple very impressive DHs as well. JD Martinez when he was with the Red Sox, Nelson Cruz when he was with the Twins, but easily the best I've ever seen of all time, Hall of Famer David Ortiz. And when Poppy hit the ball, again, just like Vladdy, you knew it had been hit. The most impressive thing was probably actually seeing batting practice and Big Poppy launching baseballs into the right field seats in Toronto when I had a chance to see him. He was just different. You knew he was going to be clutch. You knew you did not want to see him in a big spot. Big Poppy is probably the best DH of all time, and it was a privilege to say now that I had a chance to see the Hall of Famer David Ortiz, Big Poppy, in person. I'm going to hit you up with some relief pitchers as well. Not as deep a list, but I've seen guys like Aroldis Chapman, Paul Sewald, Liam Hendriks, Matt Moore was very good at one time. My favorite of all time to see was Sergio Romo with the beard and the really funky delivery, and he just looked like the closer part. Sergio Romo was a lot of fun to see pitch in person in San Francisco when I got a chance to see him against the Pirates. I really just enjoyed the whole experience, so he's probably the top reliever I've ever seen. I am disappointed because I missed out on seeing Josh Hader. I was in Arizona for 3 games between the Diamondbacks and Padres, expecting to see Hader, and he never pitched. So I'm disappointed in the fact I missed out on getting to see Josh Hader. He definitely would have been on this list, but there's some very good relievers as well. When we get in the starting rotation, I'm going to make my top 5 starters, but I have to start with Rick Porcello. And the reason why I'm starting with Porcello, he is the guy who delivered the best single game performance I've ever had a chance to see live. In Fenway Park on a Friday night, Rick Porcello threw a one-hitter against the New York Yankees and got the win. Complete game, one hit. The one hit, a home run from Miguel Andujar. Porcello that night, I was watching down the left field line. He threw a changeup that dropped, and he looked up, and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a curveball, and he looked up at the reading and it said changeup. And I thought, I've never seen a changeup drop that much. It looked like a curveball. Next pitch, he threw a curveball, and I understood. He had filthy stuff that night. Pitches were dropping an incredible amount. Rick Porcello was fantastic that night in Boston. He doesn't make my top 5, but I had to mention it's the best single game pitching performance I've ever seen. Starting with my top 5 now, number 5 is going to be Jon Lester. I didn't actually realize it till I went back in the box scores. I've seen Jon Lester twice. I saw him with the Red Sox, and I saw him with the Cubs. And you gotta say, the former world champion, he was a really dynamic left-handed pitcher. He never in my mind stood out, but when I look at my list, he has to be in my best starting rotation I've ever seen. Such a quality left-handed hitter who's going to give you inning after inning, year after year. on those World Series champions with the Red Sox and the Cubs. He is one of the better left-handers of all time, you have to say, especially in his era. So for me, Jon Lester has to be on this list. Number 3 and 4 are very interesting. I'll start with number 4 because the two of them pitched against each other the night that I got to see them. It was in San Francisco, and it was the New York Mets taking on the Giants. So number 4 on my list, I have seen Jacob deGrom in person. Now, this was deGrom before he was really deGrom. He wasn't throwing as hard yet. He didn't have the wicked slider like he does now, but he was still very impressive. Except on that night, he got roughed up a little bit, I will say, especially by our number 3 guy on this list. But Jacob deGrom, I had such a privilege to be able to say I've seen him in person. Very impressive right-hander. And there will come a day when you say, who have you seen in person? And Jacob deGrom will definitely be one of the first names out of my mouth when you think back of all my experiences. Number 3 on this list, Madison Bumgarner. Bumgarner went against Jacob deGrom that night, and sure enough, not only did I get to see Bumgarner pitch, I got to see him hit a home run against Jacob deGrom. And I will say, during those years in San Francisco, there was a real buzz in the crowd when Bumgarner came to the plate. You knew he was swinging for a home run. He was not going to hold back. Strikeouts did not matter as a pitcher, and he pitched very well that night. It was a couple years after his dominant playoff performance, they got to see Bumgarner. He was very good on those years as well. He hadn't really hit the same maybe type of expectations, but he was definitely considered for Cy Young races at that time. And I think Bumgarner is probably a borderline Hall of Famer. Jacob deGrom could be a borderline Hall of Famer in a few years. Maybe. I guess we'll wait and see on things like that. But I could add maybe a couple other Hall of Famers to my list. And Bumgarner is definitely someone I think will be up for consideration, although I don't know if he gets in. That's for a later video. Number 2 on my list, and how could I ever forget this? A Friday night in Seattle. All those big yellow K cards down the left field line in Kings Court for Felix Hernandez. Yes, I had a chance to see King Felix against my Blue Jays in Seattle on an absolutely packed Friday night. What an experience that was. Felix Hernandez is absolutely dynamic. He shut the Blue Jays down that night as well. Felix is one of the best pitchers of his era. I think he's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer as well. Again, for another video. But Felix is just electric to watch. And the Seattle fans embraced him so much. That was a fantastic experience and such a fun atmosphere to have in a game in Seattle. So Felix Hernandez is definitely in the top 5 starters I've ever seen in person all time. Number 1, the number 1 starter I've seen in person of all time is the Hall of Famer Roy "Doc" Halladay. Now, Roy Halladay is one of, if not my favorite pitcher of all time, and it was an amazing experience to have the opportunity to see Doc pitch live in Toronto. He didn't have his best stuff that night. He did not win the game against the Red Sox, but the chance for me to say that I got to see Doc Halladay pitch in person in Toronto means so much to me. He was absolutely dynamic for the Blue Jays all those years. 20-game winner, Cy Young winner. Then he went to Philadelphia, threw the no-hitter in the playoffs. Roy is one of the best pitchers of all time, especially in this era when the home run mattered so much. Roy Halladay was a real class act. He was such a joy to watch in person. The intensity was there. You could see it with every pitch. But Roy Halladay is indeed a true Hall of Famer, and I'm so privileged to have seen him in person in Toronto with my Blue Jays. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Make sure you comment down below who you've had the opportunity to see live, or maybe what player or park you want to see next. I can guarantee I will have more baseball trips in my future, especially if Alexis is going to go with me. Until next time, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, share it out with all your baseball friends for all this wonderful baseball content. Until next time, take care, everyone.